Hi, everybody. I'm Amy,
Hi, I'm Audrea.
and this is The Right Crowd. So grab a cup of coffee,
Or a cup of tea.
maybe something on the rocks, and let's get started. Okay, so we are kicking off a new book this week. It is KM. Is it Wayland or Weiland?
I've been saying Weiland.
Okay, so we're going to say Weiland, and KM, if we are incorrect, I apologize. We are starting KM Weiland's Creating Character Arcs.
And we have two different physical books this time.
We do. I have the actual book, and Audrea has the workbook.
Yes, I have the workbook.
I do have the workbook. However, I have not started the workbook because, as you can notice in Audrea's hand, it's a rather large workbook. And it has lots. It's the kind of workbook that we wish that the Anatomy of Story had. Yeah.
Mr. Truby.
If you're watching this. Yes. So this week's video is we're going to talk a little bit about the book, and it's broken up into 4 parts. So today we're going to talk about the book, why we chose the book, in part 1 in this video. Our next video will be the next 2 parts, and then this book only has 3 videos. So the last book will be part 4, which is more of a frequently asked questions section, and a wrap up. And this is the first time I've ever said that frequently word correctly the first time. I can't normally say that properly. I usually say frequently.
To each her own.
Yeah. So, do you want to kick us off, Audrea?
No, but I will. But I
Okay.
shall. All right. So we chose KM Weiland's Creating Character Arcs because it is a great book to do whether you are a beginning writer or a seasoned writer and you have a new character that you're working on for a new book or a new character in an existing series. And it is a great book to explore character arcs. And if you are new to character arcs or you want to work on building strong character arcs, my goodness, by the end of this book, and we'll talk about that in video 3, as we get to that, you're going to learn a lot about character arcs as you work through this book. So that's why we chose this book, to explore character arcs, because that's it's a really good way to build a strong novel, strong fiction.
And what is a character arc?
That is a great question. It is the path that the character goes through from beginning to end in the story. They either can start in a positive place and end in a negative place, or they can start in a negative place and end in a positive place, or they can not have any change. And we're going to talk about all of these. They can not have any change, and but the world around them changes because of the characters' movement and actions throughout the story. So there's many kinds of arcs having to do with your protagonist, and she explores them all in depth. My goodness, in a lot of depth. That's the one word that I have trouble with, depth. Depth. And also, I really like the workbook. There's so many exercises. Wow. And in the book, I do have the book on Kindle, and I've been back and forth through the book in Kindle. Lots of highlights and bookmarks in the book as we were reading this book, because she has great exercises. You don't have to get the workbook, but I think this workbook would be great if you are starting out with a new book and a new character, to help you really get to know that character. This book, the book itself and the workbook goes way beyond character worksheets and interviewing your character. Man, it goes way beyond that. So thank you, KM Weiland.
I think one of the things I like is that it's not just that it goes way beyond your character worksheets that you get with other things. is that the way she explains it and helps you understand it, to me, it's so much more simpler way of understanding all the pieces. Not that it's a simple process, but the way that she explains it makes it, made me go, oh, that's what that means. So I like how she like broke it down and made it more simple to understand.
Yes. And I want to start with a couple of things in the beginning of the book. Like in the beginning of that, I bookmarked the book. She says, by applying the foundation of the 3-act story structure and then delving even deeper into the psychology of realistic and dynamic human change, Weiland offers a beat-by-beat checklist of character arc guidelines that flexes to fit any type of story. So that's how you can use this this model for building a really good story, no matter what kind of story that you are building. And one of the quotes that I really like that she includes in the workbook, and this is not from her or about her book in particular, it's if you did your job as a writer, you know that your central character will be changed, your reader will be changed, and so will you. And that's by John Dufresne. And that's like, wow, you know, that's a great quote. And whenever I've read a book and at the end of the book, I feel like, my goodness, I feel transformed. I feel transfixed. I feel like emotional and all these things. That writer did a great job. And I love how you and I explore these author craft books in order to build stronger fiction, and with the hope for myself at least, of writing a book that does change a reader. Although, to be honest and to be fair, I do have aspirations of writing more commercial series fiction, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, where I'm not trying to change anybody's life. I just want to write a book that is entertaining, you know, like the what they used to call back in the day, what paperbacks used to be, or pulp fiction, you know, like comic book or pulp fiction that people used to just read. Like she even mentions in here at one point, series kind of used to be considered that way, and we'll talk about those. So what are your thoughts on?
One of the things I like that she put in the introduction part of the book is that she said plot and character are integral to one another. The character drives the plot, and the plot molds the character's arc. They cannot work independently. So you have to make it all work together, or it's not going to work. They are an integral part of one another. And then she goes on and explains the different types of the basic character arcs. And she says, one of the things that she says is that once you understand how plot, character, and theme all work together, chances are good that if you get one of them right, you'll get all three right. So if you figure out how to make your story work, and you understand how the flow is going to be in your story, they'll all work out together because you've put it all together properly. So I like that. And that is literally all she talks about in her introduction, is the 3 basic arcs and making it all work together.
I did like that. She does give you an understanding of the 3 basic arcs. So if you don't have an understanding of the arcs, this is a great book to start with, because you will have a really good understanding of all the arcs by the time you get through this book. And also, I like the way she boils it down in that introduction. The protagonist starts one way. The protagonist learns some lessons throughout the story. The protagonist ends in probably a better place. That's like boiling it down. It's to the simplest common story or character arc, but there's way more to it that she explains as she goes along. but that's the simple 3-step process for building a character arc that she has in the introduction.
Yeah. The only exception to that is the negative character arc,
Yep.
which when we get there, this book has made me want to write a bad guy. So,
you know, I love to read a bad guy, but I don't know if I could. I love a good anti-hero, or, you know, a really well-drawn villain. I really do. But I don't necessarily, reading this book helped me to understand why I don't necessarily like some of the books or stories that have negative character arcs. They're too depressing.
see, that's the only thing about, okay, so when we get there, remind me when we get there. I don't want to
Okay.
like talk about it now and we're like 3 videos away from it. Okay. Part 1 is, did you have anything else to say in the intro?
No.
Okay. Part 1, she discusses the positive change arc. So this is one of the 3 basic character arcs. And part 1 has a gazillion chapters, because what she did is she went over, basically, to me, the basics of the arcs in 14 chapters. And then she breaks it down to the flat arc and the negative arc. But when you get to parts 2 and 3, it's like, follow the steps in part 1, and this is how they're different for a flat arc, and this is how it's different for a negative.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information in part 1, because it goes over all the basics that you'll carry on to parts 2 and 3. Your turn.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, one of the things she says in the positive change arc, which I struggled a little with a positive change arc, because as you all know, I try to apply these books to whatever work in progress that I've got going, and I'm in the middle of a series, and I've got a couple of series that I'm working on. So in the positive change arc that she talks about, one of the things that I did highlight was, she said, she talks about how characters should be no different than people. People don't like change. People hate change. Characters are no different. They resist change. And out of resistance, it comes conflict. And out of conflict comes plot. And that was one of the things that I really liked about that first part of the positive change arc. And I highlighted that part of the beginning here. When she goes over explaining the positive change arc in its simplest manifestation, and again, as always, we recommend that you guys get the book. We don't go over word for word all of the things, but this one is a basic explanation of the positive change arc. In its simplest manifestation, it is all about the protagonist changing his priorities. He realizes the reason he's not getting what he wants in the plot is because either he wants the wrong thing, or his moral methods for achieving what he wants are all wrong. And I thought that explanation for a positive change arc is brilliant. That explains all the books and movies I've ever seen. Of course, the character is going about getting what he wants in all the wrong methods, you know, that all of the try, fail, try something different, succeed a little bit, try it differently, and all those things. That's why they work, because of that, the arc, because the character's changing a little bit and changing in a way that will get him towards the ultimate goal. And then the way she breaks down something that we talked a little bit more about in the Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and also when we worked through Truby's book about want versus need and wound and ghost. The way she explains it in reference to the character arc is really interesting with the positive arc.
When I was reading this positive, she gives you examples. Like, she goes through, like, in every chapter, she has, okay, her examples are Thor. Jane Eyre, Jurassic Park, Secondhand Lions, Toy Story, Three Kings, Green Street Hooligans, and What About Bob? So you have the only thing missing is like Hannibal. Like you have all the different types of movies and stories and everything. And she shows you every chapter for these specific books and movies. Every chapter she shows you how it applies to that. And every time I would read something about the positive change arc, I kept thinking Hallmark movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it all starts, they all start, usually there's a little problem, but it's not that big of a deal. But then it just gets better and better and better until at the end, everybody loves each other and everybody's got the inn that's broken down is no longer broken down, and there's a bakery in it and a successful B&B, and the boy gets girl and happily ever after. Like that is a Hallmark movie. And so every time I was reading something about this, about how it changed from some of them are positive to like a better positive.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
So positive arc change screams Hallmark movie to me.
A lot of the time, yeah. And then she does mention some of the romance fiction does fall into when we get to part 3 of this series of videos. Some of those do fall into that flat arc, or the what my favorite part. You know what? Sometimes you guys skip the FAQ or that stuff at the back of the book. Don't skip this time and don't skip that video. Wait till we get to that. It's good stuff. All right, more about the positive arc. All right, so the change arc she mentions is also all about the lie your character believes. And we've talked about the lie before. And I did some work on my lie. Let's see. As I was working on a lie for my character, one of my characters, Maxa, one of her lies is that she is unlovable. And one of the exercises that she does in the book, there's a lot more exercises in the workbook, but one of the exercises the things that she asks you about is the symptoms of the lie. And I don't think I've seen it phrased quite that way before, because that opened up that whole exploring the lie, the wound, and things like that a little bit more for me. Thinking of the lie and the symptoms of the lie helped me to explore that a little bit more deeply. So I really did. I really like that part of the exercises for building the character.
The thing that I like about that part is that she says, see if you can spot any of the following. And then she gives you a list of things. And then she's like, they're not the lie, by the way. Right? You may think that this is the lie, but it's not. It's a product of the lie. It's a symptom of the lie, but it's not the actual lie. Like fear, that's not the lie. You got to figure out it's just a symptom of the lie. And I like how she broke that out, because I'd never thought about that before. The other thing that I like is that she references other books that go more into detail for some of the points that she makes. The first one that she points out is a negative trait. This is the negative trait thesaurus. And that whole series of thesauruses is really good. But she points out, and I actually was like, oh, wait a minute, do I need to get that book? Because I forget which book it is, but there's a book later that she references like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, I think I'm gonna have to get this book now, because she keeps going back to this particular book. But I like how she does that. It's almost for her, it's like, here's a brief synopsis and go get this book for a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So I like that she does that. And then she, just like the other books that we've discussed, at the end, she gives you questions. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to go out and get the workbook, you don't have to. Yep. There's questions at the end of every one that goes over. It's kind of like, I told you what I told you. Now, did you understand what I said? So I like that. And then at the very end of this first chapter, she says, the lie your character believes is the foundation for your character arc. So it's very important that you figure out what the actual lie is, not just the symptom.
All right. So that's all of that was just the introduction and chapter 1 for part 1 of this hefty book. And when I say hefty, it's not really a hefty book. How thick is this book? Can you hold yours
It's
up?
actually, it's this thick. So, you know, tip of the finger.
And it's,
But there's a lot of white space around the, and between each chapter, literally, okay, so this is a chapter ending, and then you have a single sheet of space that's nothing front and back. And then you have a page with a quote, and then the next chapter starts. So there's a lot of pages in here that they're like filler pages. And it's a really quick read.
yeah, I was gonna
it's informative and it's got some great information in it, but it's not dense like the Anatomy of Story.
Yeah.
It's a quick, yeah. It took me a little over a month to get through the Anatomy of Story. I read this one in 3 days.
Yeah. But it's
still great information. It's just, it's so much more simpler to understand. Like she breaks it down. So that's good. So chapter 2 is the things your characters needs and wants. And she explains that. And one of the things that you have to keep in mind is the whole thing about your story is the lie your character believes. So what does your character want? The truth. I mean, that's what it breaks down to. Your character needs the truth. If he misses out on the truth, he's never going to be able to grow in a positive way.
Right.
And she goes through and explains that in chapter 2, using the same examples that I told you about in the other, in chapter 1. But that is what chapter 2 is about.
Yes. And, you know, I'm going to pull out one thing from chapter 2 about what your character wants. She says, your character can't just want world domination for a wife. Or, they have to, he has to want it, she has to want it for a soul deep reason. One, even he may not fully comprehend, but they can't just want world. And I love that. These villains that people are writing these days that are so compelling. They don't just want to, you know, like Pinky and the Brain. They don't just want to dominate the world. They want it for a soul deep reason that's compelling that you can't stop turning the page on. So the exercises and the way you build these arcs are going to help you get to a character that has the wants and the needs, and the exercises will help you get there.
And I know some people are like, oh, that's not a lot of information for chapter 2, because chapter 2 is literally 2 pages front and back. However, the questions that go with the chapter, like they're deep enough that you're going to get the information that you need for your book. Yeah. Like it's not just, okay, what's the truth? And then you move on to, there's 10 questions that you have to answer at the end of chapter 2 to help you move on to understanding the next part. Yeah. So, and of course.
Oh, I was gonna say, for Thor, it might just be something simple like Thor wants to be king. That's what Thor wants. He wants to be king. But why does Thor want to be king? Or for the example for Toy Story, Andy wants to be, or he wants to be, I can't remember the guy's name. He wants Woody. How do I forget the name like Woody wants to be Andy's favorite toy, but why? And things like that. So then you get to chapter 3 where you build on that with chapter 3 is your character's ghost. And that's one of my favorite chapters, I think.
And one of the things that she points out at the very beginning of chapter 3 is if there's one solid rule in fiction, it's that every effect must have a cause. You can't just put it there. There has to be a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that goes along with what we've gone over in previous books is the promises you make to your readers and making sure that you fulfill those promises. And then at the end, your reader's not going, but why did they include that thing? That didn't have anything to do with the story. So making sure that you don't just put stuff in there, like it should all have a point and a purpose to get you further along to your end goal.
And one thing that I really liked when I highlighted a lot in this chapter, because I have a lot of backstory for my characters, because I have two characters in two different series that are related. And she says about the ghost, she says is in movie speak, it's for something that is in your character's past that haunts them, which is like, duh, it's a ghost. It haunts them. I'm like, oh, it haunts them. Like those. I get it. The ghost haunts them. But she, I like how she uses ghost for this. Other writers or modalities have used the wound, and she mentions that you might have heard it as the wound. And then wounds are often kept secret from others because embedded within them is the lie. It's where that lie comes from. And explain the way she explains that helps to build out that ghost wound lie, that whole thing for your character. So it's certainly worth reading and rereading and working through.
One of the things I want to point out for this part is that she says, ghosts can often provide a tantalizing mystery. The why behind your character's belief in the lie will hook readers' curiosity, and you can string them along for most of the book with only little clues until the ghost is presented in a grand reveal towards the end. It's like Hansel and Gretel. Just leave little crumbs and they'll keep following it until they get to, hopefully it's not a witch's cabin that wants to boil them in a pot, but still it's little crumbs that someone can follow along to get to the next piece. Or you'll see a movie where literally someone's running through the woods and they're trying to find them, and then they're like, oh, there's a piece of fabric on the tree. I know that's from the dress that she was wearing. You know what I mean? So it's the same kind of thing. You don't give it all to them in the beginning. It's what's going to keep them going to the end.
Right. And I really liked on that same section how she says that sometimes in some stories you do get that grand reveal. In some stories, sometimes even in a series, you never do find out what the ghost is. Sometimes it's a mystery that it remains a mystery, but it still colors that character, the arc and how that character behaves. And I was like, yes, vindication. It's like, why is Raylan Givens the way Raylan Givens is, and how he can never hold a woman, even though the woman's, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent about Justified. Yeah. So next is the characteristic moment in the character arc.
And she says that the structure of character arc begins with the characteristic moment. And that first impressions do count.
OMG, I read and reread the characteristic moment. I never thought of the characteristic moment as the book opener. And she walks you through everything that the characteristic moment has to do. And I got tired reading it, and I got overwhelmed, and I had to lay down. And I felt like a failure in life. But, it all makes sense. And so when I had to reread that section several times, and then I thought about really good characteristic moments when you meet a character and instantly you know everything you need to know about that character, and everything you need to know about that character to keep you wanting to know more, to make you want to continue to read that story or turn the page, and everything you want to know about the villain or somebody else who's introduced in a next section of a book or something like that. So she gives you so much about how your protagonist's characteristic moment. I think it's like 10 or 11 things.
It's 11.
It's 11 things that even, and wow, 11 things that characteristic moment has to do. And even when she breaks them down into 3 things, it's still hard.
Yeah. I like that she says, your foremost job is hooking the readers.
Mhm.
He doesn't have to be nice. He just has to be interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
Just has to be interesting. And then she also says that a failed characteristic moment can mean a failed story.
No pressure.
Well, I'm sure, well, hopefully, I don't know, we haven't had this discussion, so I'm going to say hopefully you don't do this. You know how when you read a book and you'll get a chapter in, 2 chapters in, 3 chapters in, and you're going, oh my God, how long is this book? That is a failed characteristic moment.
Yes.
And for me, because I don't have a lot of time to just be wasting reading bad books.
Mm-hmm.
That if you, I mean, you should, if you haven't already gotten this from us, you should capture your reader in the first sentence, first paragraph, first page. Definitely the first chapter.
Yes.
And I will typically give a book 3 chapters. And if I'm sitting there going, is this done yet? By the end of the 3rd chapter, it is now in the pile to go to the used bookstore, so I can get a little bit of money back for what I've spent on the book. But it's a very accurate statement. A failed characteristic moment is a failed story. You have to hook the reader or they will stop turning the page. And for people who do, I think it's Kindle Unlimited, where you get paid by the page turn.
Oh yeah.
You
lose them.
You lose them.
Unless-
I actually recently had a book that I was reading that didn't capture me in the first chapter. And I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. Read the 2nd chapter and I was like, you know what? I'm returning it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't do anything for me.
Unless it's my husband, who will not stop reading a book. He must finish every book, no matter how bad it is, which life is too short to read bad books. I'm sorry. But he will finish the book. It might take him 7 years.
No.
I know. I was like, honey, and he won't read more than 1 book at a time. It's like, I can't. But anyway.
I have 6 books going right now. How does he only read 1 at a time?
I don't know. All right. So let's see. That's a characteristic moment. It's a big moment in your character's life and a big moment in your book. So lots of reading there. And then she talks about the normal world. And I like how she talks about the normal world. And Truby had this conversation about the normal world as a symbol. And it's a place that your character is either going to have to escape from or want to return to, and using it in your book that way. And one of the things that I really like about this, the book, and she does it in the workbook too, is I'm going to find a place that all throughout the book, she has the percentage of where this place, like the first plot point, the midpoint, the first act, what percentage of your book that place should appear at. That's not good English. What percentage of your book what percent of your book that should appear at? Is that better? I don't know. You know what I think I meant. You know what I thought I meant. You know what I meant, I think. I don't know. Read it yourself, people. Okay, let's move on.
Help us understand what your character's lie is, what that ghost is, and then get them to the point to where, unless you want it to be a negative arc, or it's a flat arc and you just want the world around them to change, not them change, help us see how they can break out of, like, you're always meant to be A. Help us see them go through that process of breaking out of that and realizing they could really be G if they
Yes,
want to.
show us a glimmer of how they can break it. Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about Normal World?
No, nothing else I want to say about the normal world.
And again, at the end, it's the same book, the same stories that she's reviewing and telling you how it applies. And then she gives you the questions to go over for yourself.
Right. So then she moves us through basically all of the beats. That's a throwback to a previous book we've done. All of the beats of your story for a positive change arc. You've got your first act. You've got your first plot point, which is going to occur around about the 20 to 25% mark of your book. And then you've got your first half of the second act, which when she starts to break it up that way, I love that because it really is like a roadmap to writing a book out or plotting a book out by the character arc. And you can see she's mapped it out according to the 3-arc structure. Right. So it's like you put your 3-act structure on top of your character arc, and then she's plotted them along. So if you write according to your 3-act structure, which according to John Truby says, don't do that. But if you write that way, you can plot the same way with the character arc. But so then she goes into all of those parts, and she gives you examples from in a romance. She talks about this what may be where the leads go out for the first time. That's in the first plot point. She goes into the midpoint. Then we talk about the second half of the second act. And did you have any? I have lots of highlights in, let's see.
I have so many highlights.
Yeah.
I have so many highlights. But I think the thing that I like the way she breaks it down is that she says, okay, so now here is where there's one part where I lost it because I kept going with what you were saying. But there's one part where she's like, she'll tell you this is where you should be. And then she breaks it down as to this is how you got here.
Yes.
And this is how you move the story along, not just we're at the 25% mark and this is where you should be next. Like she actually breaks it down and helps you see how you got there. And then every step along the way, she gives you the same examples. She doesn't pick different stories. She's sticking with Thor and Toy Story, like through the whole thing.
Yes.
And I like that. The other ones that she does more in depth is she does Christmas Carol and Cars, where she gives more in-depth examples of. But I like how she does. This is where you are, but you're not there yet because this is the first half of that, and then in the second half of that, you're going to do this. Like I like how she breaks that down because most people that I've seen don't do that, and I like how she does tell you at what percentage in the book you should be at when you get to this part.
Which is neat. Helpful.
Yeah. Let's see. What's next? I also like that in the second half, second act,
yes,
she tells you where you should be, like the protagonist now gets it. But I like that she also then breaks down 6 parts of the character arc in the second half of the second act. Like she tells you where your character should be, how your character should be developing, not just where your story should be at. And that like one part she says is by purposefully placing the character in a second half scene that is similar to a first half scene, you're able to give readers a dramatic representation of the progress he's made in his personal evolution. And I remember, I can remember seeing things like that in movies, where that they see them in almost kind of the same scene, but they respond completely differently because they've grown so much through the process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The way she explains some of the, because she does have examples from Star Wars in here and Jurassic Park, as you mentioned, in Thor, the way she explains those movies my golly gosh, Rooney, it made me want, I'm gonna have to rewatch some of those movies now. I'm gonna rewatch What About Bob, and I'm gonna rewatch Jurassic Park just so I can pick up on some of the things she's pointed out about character arcs. Because I won't say that I missed it. It's just that I didn't see it in that same light. You know,
Yeah.
I picked up on what she talks about with the kids, but it's not that it went over my head. It's like, oh, that's nice. Let's move on. I'm like, what did the dinosaurs do next? And so
Yeah.
it's really cool the way she points it out in light of a character arc in here.
Yeah. And then did you have anything else before the third plot point?
Nope.
Okay, so then she moves on to the third plot point. And one of the things that she points out is she says, before this story can end, the lie has to reappear front and center and confront the protagonist head on. Like that lie has to come around to where they can see and you can see how the character has changed. And literally, I don't know if y'all can tell how much I've highlighted just on these 2 pages. Like everything is highlighted on these 2 pages. Because this is the part where your reader's going to get it, your characters are going to get it, and the things start, like she says, at this point, the choice must become more than a decision, it must become an action. Like they're now moving towards the thing that they originally believed was a lie, kind of thing. And then she moves to the third act. And what's funny is she's got these quotes in between. And this is one that I hear just in everyday life. And it's life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
Like I hear that all the time. Well, apparently the third act is when the comfort zone ends for our character.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's where the comfort of I would have thought, and I would have put it at the what do you call it? The inciting incident is where the comfort zone ends. But that was pretty cool the way she put it.
Yeah, the way she explains it.
Third act.
And then she breaks down the parts of the third act. And then we go to the climax. And the climax is your whole reason for the story. Like, why are we reading the story? Why did you write the story? And she breaks it down and she says, they've seen your character shaken up, regain his footing, see his revelation, transition from the lie, go towards the truth, act on the truth, and now and then he paid the price. So now you're at the end of your story. And you should be at 90% mark.
Yes. Just pretty cool.
One of the things that she points out from another book, someone else's book, Jordan McCullum's book called Character Arcs. She points out that Jordan says, make sure that the character learns her lesson very close to the climax. And the problem with not waiting to the end is that if she learns her lesson too early, why is your reader going to keep reading?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like you've spoiled it. You've given away the end.
Like, I'm done.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you don't reveal too early. And that it's also where you make sure that all the things that you promised your reader have come to light. Like you didn't leave anything left unsaid. And then chapter 14, which I believe is the last chapter in part 1, is the resolution. And she says, why do we need the resolution at all? This important ending scene or scenes is there to bookend the opening scene.
Yeah, which I always like it when a writer does that, when they in other craft books they call it like a mirror scene. I really like it when that's done well. It just feels like, oh, I feel better. I've been on a really long on a roller coaster and now I feel better. when they've done a good resolution scene.
Yeah. And there are some books that are fine where your reader's going at the end, oh my God, what just happened? I can't believe that that's the end. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And if your book is written that way for that purpose, then that's great. Like I'm part of a Facebook group where they discuss books. Some of these people, like there's people that are reading 200-300 books a year. I'm like, oh no, oh. My goal is 100 this year, and I'm so far January I did good. I got my 8 in, so I'm good so far for January. But some of them come on and they're like, I'm looking for a book that's going to wreck me. So there are people that want that kind of book where they get done and they're just, oh my gosh, I'm not that person. But if you're that writer, there are readers for that.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I think this is more of a, you're not, well, it's a positive change arc. So you're not looking for that kind of ending with this kind of arc. Later arcs and further videos will explain that there's room for that. For this specific character arc, you're looking for, I don't know if I want to say a neat little package tied up in a bow, but you do want to go back and show your reader how the character changed and that they got everything that the reader was expecting was there. And that's all I have to say.
Well, coinkadinkly, that is the end of part 1 and the end of this first video in the creating character arcs.
Yep. I guess I want to say one more thing.
Okay. You tricked us. You tricked us. You said that's all. But no.
I thought I was done.
Okay.
But the very last part of part 1, she says, it isn't enough to simply have a character change. He must change in a way that harmonizes with the patterns we all recognize in our own lives and those of our family and friends. Readers will resonate with those patterns in your characters, and they will be moved by them. You have to make it realistic. Even Cinderella.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's all things that we can resonate and go along with. So that is the end of part 1, which means that is the end of this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, all those good things. Sign up for our newsletter. And you will be entered at this month, you will be entered into winning Save the Cat. So be sure that you sign up and check out our newsletter, all those good things. Anything else, Audrea?
Nothing else.
Join us next week as we discuss parts 2 and 3 in KM Weiland's Creating Character Arcs. Bye.